I always like to start with one question with every guest, and that kind of topples into a lot of other things. And I was thinking, the first time we met, you had told me how you had started your career working with ticket sales, right, for the PHX Suns, right? And now I see a lot of pictures of you hanging out with people, doing events on the other side of that. So you, at one point you were selling the tickets, now you're buying the tickets, right? And then what it reminded me of is a book from long ago, Charles Dickens, Tale of Two Cities, right? And the first phrase in that book is very popular, and you've probably heard it. If you read the book, you'd recognize it. It's the best of times, it was the worst of times. And what the story is about is like the French Revolution, people with two different sides of the world, aristocrats versus everyone else, and kind of the uproar, right? And what I thought about was how when you were selling the tickets, that was one side. Everyone's living, everyone's at this game, right? But their experience is different. And one of them is the person that sold the ticket is keeping their clients happy, doing all that. And then the other side of it is the person that's actually buying tickets and having fun. They're the same event, same event that they're going to, but it's two separate experiences, much like in this book where they kind of go through, what it's like on both sides. Someone hiding the fact that they're an aristocrat and, they don't want to get caught, right? And that doesn't really necessarily relate to you, but I thought it was interesting where it's like there is always one thing happening, and there's always two sides of it, right? And you've been on both sides. From the business perspective, you've been on the sales side from the very beginning, took a leap of faith, and then now you're on the other side, right? And now when you post these events, it's like you've come not necessarily full circle, but you've gone the both sides of the situation. So my question is more so specific to that journey and kind of how it's different now than it was before. And like looking back, because I don't necessarily think people really ask that question of the journey or what it was like in the beginning. And what you told me was, I don't remember your exact words, but if I were to paraphrase, it's pretty shitty as a ticket salesperson, right? And now it's a different thing. So I guess with that, I'll ask you, do you ever look back on the days of selling tickets and think how far you've come today?
Yeah, I do. Just thinking, I was just like visualizing. I was at the Suns game the other day and I pointed to somebody who had a full suit and he was 24, 25 years old. And I told the person I was with, I was like, I used to be that guy. And what I meant was, he was around tapping everybody courtside at the Suns game on the shoulder. Hey, Mr. Mrs., how you doing? Enjoying the game? Oh, who's your friend? And I looked and I remember getting my start that way. Another example, I was at the Cardinals game on the field this weekend with Discount Tire and Best Western CIO. And my sales rep had taken us on the field to walk around, and I almost feel like I'm still a rep at times. I'm looking at them to kind of make sure they're enjoying the experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to curate what I've learned and what I think they would want from that experience. So, yeah. But do I really see it as myself, the opposite? Not really. I guess sometimes I think, how do I make their lives easy? If somebody cold called me this summer to sell me the Cardinals Morgan Athletic Club seats, and I bought them, and I said, congrats, go out for dinner. You just made a sale of your life, but off a cold call. And I said, don't forget what kind of prospecting and that things can happen when you just hustle, So I wanted to reinforce that. I'm doing my renewal right now with some other tickets, and I made it really easy with her. I was like, you have my word. I'm just figuring out some logistics, but when your manager asks you which accounts are renewing, just make sure that you tell them it's a sure thing with us. And I'm doing things like that because I'm remembering what it felt like in their shoes and what can I do as a client or entrepreneur, business owner to just make their life a little bit easier. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big, not necessarily a big miss, but it's something that's overlooked with a lot of executives in like the tech space specifically, right? And what I mean by that is it's not anything bad, right? It's just that they haven't had the experience of being on the sales side, right? So a lot of times, like end of year, I'm going to get that sign before Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever holiday they're celebrating, or before the new year. And people on the sales side are relying on that DocuSign to come through.
Yeah.
They're relying on that, and there's a manager that's committed that deal, even though it's not for sure because they want to look good to their boss.
Totally.
And then it's just like this, pipeline call where everyone's fighting to say we're going to get to where we're supposed to be. But generally, the salespeople are at the very bottom.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know. Like, I've had plenty of times where I was committed for stuff that I wasn't even sure about. And it's like, why would you commit that? And it's like, oh, we have to. We have to look good, right? And it's like, okay. So now it's my job to go get it. And there's always like follow up, what's the deal with this renewal, like in your case. So what's interesting about that is because you've been through the experience of the other side, maybe being ghosted, waiting for an answer, having to report something up, having to commit something, you almost have more, I don't know if appreciation is the right word, but more understanding of, or empathy for the person on the other side. Yeah. And you always hear about it a lot. And since you technically with recruitment, right, or staff aug, maybe a combination of both, it's essentially a sales role, right? And to run a business, to run payroll, you have to understand what the outlook looks like, right? With contracts, what's coming in, what's going out. So it makes sense that you have to run a business, you have to understand money coming in, money out, right? It's a typical math equation. In minus out equals, the profit or whatever. But if someone's never run a business, they've never been on the sales side, and they've only been on the client side, they don't necessarily have those optics. And a lot of times what you'll find is people, not that they maliciously do it, but just kind of maybe blow things off or don't respond quicker or just because they're busy, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just when you've been on both sides, you understand what it's like to not get that phone call when your boss is expecting something, right? So I think it goes a long way, and I think the best thing that people can do is just communicate and say, I'm on the fence with this. And then, have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
No, I haven't.
So he's a former, I think he's FBI negotiator, world renowned, and in the book, he talks about getting to know. Everyone wants to hear yes. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone wants to hear it, right? But he said the magical moment always happens when you hear no. Because no comes from a place of authority. And no kind of sets the tone for who is in control. And with control, you have decisions being made. For example, I have 2 daughters, right? They ask me something, I say no. They're not in control of that. I am, because I'm the one that's making the ruling. No. But between client and sales relationships, when the client says no, it opens a door of understanding there's a reason why it's no. Could be budget, could be timing, could be whatever, right? But if all you hear is yes, 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 you don't have a sale. Yeah. You need to hear the no, because behind all the yeses is a no eventually. Mm-hmm. And once you get to the no, you can understand the root issue that's causing the roadblock, right? So it's always interesting, for me, talking with people on one side, and I always just tell people what it's like, and they're just like, I never would have thought of that. Like, a lot of people that have come in here haven't thought of things a certain way from a sales perspective, and then when they leave, they're like, I never really looked at it that way. And then now when they kind of go forward, I'd imagine that some of the things that we talked about, they take with them and kind of use that with the people that they work with to kind of improve the experience for everyone. So I thought it was interesting. I wanted to ask you, looking back, it's kind of one of those things, like, you can go back 20 years. I mean, for you, I think it's been like 8 years or so?
Yeah, just under, like 6.5, but almost 7. Yeah.
So 7 years. Did people think you were crazy when you started?
Yeah. I have a prominent CEO, Chandler, software company.
Okay.
Who was a friend of my old business partner. And he said, you're crazy. You're going to fail at this. And I was like, come on, man. Like, I look up to you, And he's like, he was at my Christmas party and he stayed late night and we're like over the island in my kitchen. And he's like, recruiting, it's a dime a dozen. Like, and as soon as automation takes over, you're not going to have a job or a company,
Mm-hmm. So this was like a really good friend of yours.
Yeah.
So if your really good friends are doubting you, or they're doubting the potential, I guess where did you find the courage
Yeah. Well, when the last company that I was a part of dissolved, and I was kind of left without a job, it was go back to the Phoenix Suns and sell tickets and sponsorships on a higher level, or it was learn what you failed at and learn from the last dissolving of the business. And at 29, 30 years old, just got married, about to have a child, go into startup and build something,
Hmm.
at 30 years old that I can hang on till I'm 60 and see where it goes to. So
Yeah, because there's nothing crazier than starting a business with getting married and a newborn on the way.
totally. It was
So,
nuts.
so,
I
you,
just, yeah, yeah.
so you're definitely crazy, but I almost feel like people that are crazy are the ones that are crazy enough just to make it through, right? Because if you don't, we'll say if you don't, I think the biggest thing that most people don't realize is doing something like that isn't crazy. It's just having enough confidence in yourself or confidence in what you believe you can do.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people that will say, you're not going to be successful, you will not make it, you will fail. And they'll happily sit there and watch you without necessarily offering help,
Right.
but they'll offer you, their opinion. And then, what I would find interesting here is after 1 year, after 2 years, they probably changed their tone, right? They kind of realized that it wasn't necessarily what they had thought it was going to be for you specifically. And then they kind of look back and like, oh, did you ever run into where people were kind of doubters and then they were believers along the way? I'm sure you did, right?
Yeah.
So what's different in the way that you kind of interact with those people? Because for me, I would think that there's a lot of supporters that want to see you succeed, but they can't necessarily help you. Like they're there to boost you, like a wife or your kids, but they can't necessarily do anything for you. Um, and then there's people that don't, that when they see you succeed, the tune changes to like, I knew you could always do it, right? I find that interesting because I've kind of run across that even with the setup where I'll give you a really good example. My wife told me this was a waste of time. She told me it was a waste of time and it was a waste of money. And I said, this is it. This is the answer. This is the only way to get the recognition, marketing, to build something that no one else ever would be crazy enough to build.
Yeah.
To do something that no one else is willing to spend the money on, to get to meet the people that no one else ever has the ability to. And she was just like, look, you do whatever you want, right? But I don't think this is, I think you should she really told me, I think you should focus your efforts on something different and doing what you've been doing and getting the results. And I was just like, nah, because it's so hard to do cold outreach, right? So I'm a little bit crazy too. And part of the reason why I wanted you to come in is because we met about a year ago, right? I think we actually met for lunch at, I don't know, do you remember the place, the coffee place?
Henry?
The Henry. And I was in the middle of this massive deal that I lost.
Yeah.
And I remember you were sitting across from me and I was talking about how we're battling right now. And I'm like, I'm on the ropes, but I got a plan to win. Ended up winning and then I ended up losing, right? And what I remember specifically in that situation was you text the CIO of the company that I was working with to get that deal done. And you said, hey, what do you think about Fern? Like you really pulled out your phone and did that. And I remember thinking like, man, I can't even do that. I don't even know. I don't have his email. I don't know how to get a hold of him. And I think ultimately that's kind of what led to the downfall of that specific situation for me was I didn't have the connection at the right level, right? To be able to get that exposure. So when it all came crashing down and burning and I lost everything, the one thing I thought about was, why can't I just be more like Graham? Where I could just pick up the phone and message people that are in these positions that can help me, right? And the other part of it was, we talked and you were like, hey, maybe you come over here and do some stuff, right? And And I remember thinking, man, he saw something different, maybe something special. And there were plenty of times where it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm just staring at the ceiling fan, contemplating my life decisions, right? And I remember one time I was like, Graham's he's come across a lot of people, but he saw something, right? He believed, or he saw something enough in me, a complete stranger. And why don't I see that in myself? And that's kind of, then I had this idea of doing a podcast. So I don't think you realized it, but like a lot of things that from that one lunch interaction kind of snowballed into where we're at today. And that's kind of, part of, we'll say, the inspiration is like that specific situation that you were a part of, where you just took out your phone and you just sent this message, like really showed me that I didn't have the same sort of, we'll say, relationships, leverage. And ultimately, that's where I decided, that's where I need to go, right? So my wife can thank you for me spending all this money.
Can I break down that situation for you and how I think about it?
Yeah, go ahead, tell me.
When we had coffee, well, first of all, question a few ones ago of belief. Belief is important, but it's the only thing that matters. It's so important, having belief in yourself, you know? And when you have that deeply, this really deep belief, feel like you can put your mind to anything, and it's not a question of like if you're going to get there, but when. It could be slower than you think. But then you start to have an instinct, and you start to meet people, and you just have more belief in them than they do in themselves at sometimes, just because of the experience. But when I met you, I was like, I knew some people you knew in common. You thought different. You had a high level of curiosity. You had a high level of humility, what you didn't know. And then you're trying to get that deal done, and you saw the power of political relationships, which is really what it is. Now, high-level relationships, okay, but I'm fascinated a little bit with politics sometimes, because there's a lot of people that want things changed, but unless you have the right connections, things don't happen. So that can be transferred into the tech world as well. You can want a deal, but even when I sold PHX Suns seats, you can want to sell courtside seats, and you can be talking to the vice presidents and directors. Wouldn't this be nice? But unless you're at the top, and unless you tug at the heartstrings and bring their child along for some father-son or mother-son time that they've been lacking because they've been working too much, you get them emotionally invested, then you start to kind of turn the table, And so that is kind of getting granular, but I believed in you when I met you. I knew, and I still know, something will work out. You'll figure out this path. And then when you told me, it doesn't surprise me that you built this, because you already had a curiosity to what made me successful, and you listened, and you saw the power of me being able to text that guy. And you were like, how do I create what Graham has, but in a different way? And this is by empowering people to get their voice out, building a relationship, and seeing where it goes from there, So I love this vehicle. And the way that I look at this vehicle is, if I ever want to take a recruiting company into a system integrator with some resale, always wanted to work with you. But now I start to think, okay, now he's kind of becoming full package. Now I can add on this service as well into HireRising. That's how, I'm already thinking that kind of way of, we don't have a marketing, arm. We don't have podcast arm. We don't have some creative ways to do things different, because nobody's doing this in our space locally.
No, you have to be insane, right? And I like to think that I am, because I always talk about gambling, and I've got some crazy stories about gambling, and I kind of feel like gambling is the essence of success. It's there's people I've told stories to, they're just like, no way. And then I'm like, well, I got pictures, right, of some of these games that I've been to, and it's the amount of money that you see transferring between people is just insane. But it's also, I remember the first time I made a $10,000 check, blew my mind, right? And I was actually at my parents' house with my brother and his wife and my girlfriend at the time, who's my now wife. And I had let it slip that I had my first major check for $10,000. I remember his wife, ex-wife now, she goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you made that much money." at the top of her lungs. I'm just like, wow. And then you make 20, you make 30, you make 50, then you make 60. I forget where my cap was, but it was probably close to that, right? And it's like you look back at the 10, you think there was a time where that was crazy, right? And people thought I was like, something special. And then you kind of go along and then you realize that you're just a small fish in a giant ocean, right? Like my partner Josh, you saw the warehouse, right? It's like he runs massive amount of volume through the warehouse for e-commerce stuff. But you compare him to some of these other people, like out of different regions, and he's just, he's one of the larger ones on Amazon, but like comparative to like non-e-commerce business, like organizations, like he's a small fish. But relative to the other Amazon sellers, he's kind of like the white whale. And one thing he always told me, he goes, you're dumb. You gamble a bunch for fun. And one of the things that he told me was, well, how about you just gamble on yourself for one time in your life? And I was like, damn. Kind of like hit me in my heart, because it's just like I'm out here just having fun gambling for money when I should be investing in myself, right? When I should be investing in doing something for me, right? Starting a business, doing something like you said you'll have in 30 years when you're 60. In order to take that leap, you have to really believe, or you just have to be crazy. And I think both of us share a common bond in being crazy. I did it more so with kids, houses. My wife doesn't work, right? So I feel like for me, it was a major gamble. But if you're not crazy enough to do it, you'll never come out on the other side with the crazy story about it,
Mm-hmm.
All that to say, one of the main reasons why I really wanted to have you in early on was because that lunch, even though it was complete dumpster fire afterwards for me in terms of personal life, it was kind of like the spark. It was kind of like the inspiration, right? And for that, I think I should at least say thank you, because without looking back and thinking, what did he see that I don't see? I might not have ever built this, and I might have just had my tail through my legs, turning around and trying to figure out the next step. But instead, it's just like, let's just keep going deeper, right? Let's just keep pushing. And then now, what I find interesting is I talk to all these people that were former guests, and we go to lunch or we have dinners, travel and do stuff with people, meet new people. I've met so many people just by doing this. But I feel like without that major like disruption in my life, or even that lunch, for example, I may not be in the spot. So a big part of, maybe where this is today is because it started with a little glimmer of hope, a little glimmer of, what was it that Graham saw that I don't see? And that's kind of what I've just been, working with. Yeah. I do have a couple questions that are more so related to like work, right? And I know, because you told me, but I also saw online that this year was HireRising's best year ever. Hands down, compared to every other year. 6 years in, you guys essentially crushed what you've done in the prior years. And my curiosity is more so, a lot of times you hear about all these jobs that are out there, but no one's hiring, or they're like fake jobs, right? And a lot of times I think recruitment gets a bad name from people looking because there's so much supply of candidates and there's only so much demand and there's only so much time to respond to everyone, I would imagine. But I'm curious, like, if you're having the best year ever, like, is that specific in a certain field of tech, or like where are you guys seeing most of it? Because I think a lot of people I've spoken with are in security.
Totally.
And security is a tough gig to get into.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it's hard to get into security, or impossible, unless you kind of go around the corner and like come in through another role, like right. Help desk, for example.
Help desk systems, yeah.
But I think you're on the front lines with a lot of these organizations here locally in Arizona that are looking for talent. So I'm curious, like, where is the demand today compared to where it was a year ago? Mm-hmm. And based on the relationships you have, where do you see it going for people? But maybe it's a good way for people to kind of reevaluate their skill set and plan for 2025.
Yeah. We were fortunate, you're right, and thank you also for the kind words about the inspiration for this
Mhm.
studio. Still believe in you, and I, you know, you're going to do some great things, but I just got to keep figuring out the path. In terms of hiring, we doubled this year. The staffing industry grew only 2%. We grew 90%. The big difference is we switched, and we didn't switch a model. We just added a couple different sets a couple years ago to make sure we diversified. So rather than just full-time direct placement, which is great in the healthy economy, we added contract staffing, staff aug, and we added nearshore staffing, which takes advantage of globalization and competes against offshore. It might be a little bit more expensive nearshore, but it's central time zone, English speaking, high connectivity, low attrition. And so how we really grew was the contract staffing portion. A fun fact is half of our business was placement, half was contracting 2 years ago.
Okay.
This past year was 90% contracting, staff aug, 10% placement. And so actually our permanent placement business fell 60, 70%. So would have been out of business if I hadn't had contract staffing. Even nearshore grew as well. And so I diversified a couple years ago, knowing good times were going to end and that there was going to be a slowdown in the economy. And why the slowdown happened was high interest rates and an overhiring during post-COVID.
Yeah.
Going into this next year, I think we're going to double again and have 100% growth. I have a really good team on board, but we're going to continue to focus on the contract staffing, nearshore, and perm. And I would say, to answer the question of what people should expect in 2025, rates are coming down, economy looks good. You're going to have more and more businesses cutting their contract ratio portions and hiring more full-time. The reason why is because when there's certainty, full-time direct hire, onboard people, benefits. When there's uncertainty, contract. Well, there's more certainty going on, so you're going to see those ratios switch. And why would you switch? Because contracting a lot of the times is almost 60% margin or 100% margin. It's more expensive to have contractors on. So companies are looking at it and saying, we have 80% contractors. I see some certainty we're going to grow next year. Let's convert them into full-time employees, reduce our costs on an hourly basis. But now we've got employees, like we don't want to lose them or take a hit in the economy. So there's more certainty. The other reason we were able to double is because companies had cash this past year. The S&P was at an all-time high. Interest rates were high, and similar to my business, I didn't triple this year, and I could have, by taking on more debt and opening a new office. Instead, I doubled, but I took profits and I paid down all my debt. Okay. The reason I paid down debt is because right now it's at 10, 11%. I think Prime's at 9. So if you have a bank that's Prime plus 1, it might be 10%. So if I'm borrowing money at 10%, still the economy is enough uncertainty that let me go pay that debt down and make it free 10% by paying down my debt. Then over leveraging into a new office and maybe tripling. And so bigger companies, all rolls downhill was let's get contractors from Graham. We have IT stuff. We are paying down our debt, but we're not going to overinvest in full-time direct hires because we wanted to see how things were going to, political climate, other things. So that's why.
Okay, that makes sense. So when you say nearshore, Latin America, right?
Yeah. Hubs in Costa Rica, but now we can recruit and employ out of every country in Central and South America.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how much you've seen, but I've seen quite a bit of security people investing in Mexico and South America specifically, where the talent for cybersecurity is kind of flourishing, right? So there's a few companies here locally. I wish I could remember their name, but I remember the people that posted it, where they've invested, 4 or 5 million in branch offices in like Guadalajara, for example,
right.
And then other places that are investing in like GCP services out of Latin America, right? Like one of the guys I introduced you to has a company that does that, right? And he specifically focused on South America, Latin America for a lot of his talent, but also for a lot of the services he does for the local economy. Yeah. So you're saying that more people are willing to pay a higher premium for a short-term contract than they are to hire someone full-time through placement.
Yes.
So where does that leave like the talent here locally? Right? So I guess maybe more so the question is, if someone is looking for placement, but everyone's looking for contract, where do those two worlds combine or come together?
Yeah, it's no longer though. Right now, you're going to see a lot of companies. Like I have a big Fortune 250 that I met yesterday for lunch, and I see what their plans are, and they're going to move a lot of their contractors into full-time direct hire.
Okay.
The problem with that is there's contractors that, on average, contractors make 20% hourly more than a full-time direct hire.
Okay.
The reason why is because of the uncertainty. So you're actually like trading extra money for that uncertainty. The minute that when companies start to change those ratios to save money and say, hey, it's okay, just time to go full-time direct hire, a lot of the contractors are going to say, I want to keep earning this kind of money, and they're not going to take that. And so then they're going to be bounced. They're going to have to find a new home.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be some attrition when you change those ratios. There's people that leave. And so there's going to be an opening for, if we're talking the local, local talent here, there's going to be openings for full-time direct hires for local people who want a good job.
Okay.
So that's what's going to happen. I've seen it.
Yeah, it seems like a tough world when you're so they're making 20%. We'll call it like uplift for risk, which is typically like any sort of time and materials compared to fixed fee, right? Fixed fee always has a higher uplift to it than time and materials because
it's even higher than time and materials. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and it's like you're looking at it, from
for the consultant,
the risk perspective, right? In terms of like talent demand, where are you seeing most of the current demand for you guys? If it's on contract, right, you probably see a lot more of those than you do direct hire. So like, what categories then?
Well, and now it's 50-50, 60-40. Like I said, the economy's it's hot since September. It is really hot right now. This is the busiest we've ever been in December.
Really?
Yeah, so busy. I have 43 open jobs. I normally have like 5 or 10.
And these are direct hire jobs?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a mix of contract, but I would say of the 43, 23 of them are direct hire, 20 are contract. It's crazy right now. Companies are ready to hire direct hire. I just had a local MSP reach out to me, 12 new direct hires, and hey, we're ready to pay a fee, and we need these 12 people. And I'm like, you're a small company. They're like, we just see the growth. We are getting asked for projects. Then I had a cybersecurity company come out of the woodwork yesterday and go, Graham, you remember me from 5 years ago? I was like, briefly. He was like, I was a rep, but now I'm the VP for sales, but at a cybersecurity firm locally. We're up and coming. We need to talk. I want you to be my recruiting partner. I'm like, okay, so, and it's offensive cyber roles that they want.
So like red teaming stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But you don't see those. You don't see those things happen unless I haven't seen those in years. That kind of stuff happen. These are small companies. These aren't big that had like a big game plan. These are small companies that are taking risks.
Yeah. So you kind of see like the writing on the wall where cyber and more specifically like red teaming type stuff for a lot of the smaller organizations are really starting to pile up. And so these contracts, do they start in like January? Like, or are you doing the work now to sign?
Well, no, they start whenever. They get renewed end of the year. And so right now we have 66 contractors, and basically all of them got renewed. I mean, that's like a really, really positive thing. Normally they'll expire at the end of the year. And I think maybe we have 2 or 3 that aren't. But most all of them are. And they're renewed through Fortune 250s that I can name in town. And some of them are through August and some of them through December. So they did a whole nother year, which tells me, okay, we still need some contract labor and we want to keep people in that realm, but we're also going to turn to FTE, direct hire. You also asked me the talent set. The highest talent, the talent that I'm seeing right now are data engineers, .NET developers, Java, RPG. I'm seeing.
I'm not familiar with RPG. What is that?
It's like a robotic process automation type.
Oh, okay. So like PLC type stuff, or like maybe not PLC specifically, but
there's some stuff that's also like a lot of companies are trying to get off. What is it? AS4000,
400
AS400.
mainframe.
Yeah.
They're trying to move off the mainframe.
Totally. And it's going to take a while, but it's very hard right now. Like I just had a big client that was like, I had 2 clients actually in the last week, both of them saying the same thing. One was home builder and one was waste management. And they were like, got to get off our AS400, but how do I tell people that know that technology who are retiring? How do I tell people that we are sunsetting this over 7 years? So come on board. And by the way, you won't have a job in 5 years, So that's like a tough one.
And AS400 people are really hard to find.
Yeah.
I remember trying to find some, and I remember hearing of people finding them, and it was like finding a unicorn. So they're far and few in between.
It's like a Cobalt developer.
Yeah, they're very rare, but they generally share similar characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
They should have been retired, or they are retired, right? So I mean that's not surprising, because I think a lot of companies are looking to get off of the mainframe and kind of refactor or redesign their applications around what that system did for them. And that gets pretty expensive. But the nice part is, if you have a stable, is what we'll call it, a stable of talent that specializes in AS400, you kind of become the one-stop shop for anything AS400 sunsetting, right?
Totally. From one project to the next. And then I can go to them and say, join HireRising, AS400, guy or girl, and I got a project for you. And then once that's over, I got another project for you and another project for you, And so you can take 7 years at HireRising, focus on AS400, and sunset 13 clients for us, So I can kind of do that because I'm touching multiple environments.
So the rule of thumb here is, if you are an AS400 engineer or admin or something with AS400, you have to give Graham a call, because you're probably going to retire soon, and you might as well retire and then sunset a bunch of other organizations and close out the AS400 legacy, right?
Work 10 hours a week or work 40 hours a week, whatever you want.
And make 20% more than you were making at the last
Or even
place.
more now with the unicorn.
Yeah, because there's such high demand. I don't want to say that the hourly pricing that I heard of when I was in this position, but I can guarantee you $250 is pretty low from what I remember. $250 an hour, that is. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I figured I'd ask that, because a lot of times, so I'm going to be at Grand Canyon today, Mike's class of new TSU, which is like a security, not like a mentorship, but it's kind of like a program that he's built to where he has anyone come in for free, 13-week deal, and they go through kind of like start to end of security, like a crash course, right? Free to the community, starts at 5:30. Cool. Today's a graduation, and I graduated the last cohort, so now it's the newest one. So I'm gonna go there tonight with that camera, and I'm gonna take pictures, so all of his, all the students get like a image with him, shaking his hand and kind of having that for whatever. So I'll be up there, and I think a lot of times the people in that specifically are looking to get into cyber. So I thought it'd be interesting to ask you specifically, like, where you're seeing the need for talent, because that might just be something that they could find useful and maybe start pursuing different things, right? So that was kind of the motivation for that. The other thing, that I was thinking about was, I'd done a little research on you, right? I had to, because there's nothing bad, don't worry. And so I will say this. You have, hands down, probably the best head of hair in the industry.
Nice. Can I tell you a quick funny story?
Go ahead. Tell
the
me.
logo of HireRising was almost my hair.
Oh, like a
it was going to be like a silhouette,
shot?
like of a guy. It was going to be like just a draw of a guy, like a cartoon, like a face but no face, and then the hair. And it was going to be called. I mean, there was a couple names that HireRising was going to be called, but one of them was Arcadia Hire, and it was going to be me.
So what's the other names?
Oh man, it's going to be called Hire Pirate.
Hire Pirate.
Hire Pirate. Gonna steal your booty. Based in Phoenix, Arizona.
No way.
Totally. It was going to be.
So you can't make that up on the fly. I mean, you could.
I just thought of the largest brands in the world, and when they had all of my competitors, and then they had Hire Pirate LLC, on there, they were going to say, who the heck are these people, And it was about stealing, and, and I didn't want to.
So okay. So when I hear HireRising, I don't think of the word hire, like hire someone for a role. So was that intentional?
I HireRising was supposed to be and is going to be a large consulting business similar to a Deloitte, Ernst Young, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Mhm.
That's going to perform some of the largest digital transformations in the country, is what we're going to be. And staffing's a means to get there, people relationships. I wanted HireRising not to be my name, but I wanted it to be one of our core values is dream big, like I do. And so hire, I wanted somebody to elevate in their career. It wasn't about hiring. It
Yeah.
was about elevating in their career. And Phoenix and Rising was a tribute to where this company was born in Phoenix. And I'm not going to move it for tax purposes or any other reasons. It's going to be based in Phoenix, and it's going to be a Phoenix darling that hopefully I can leave to the community one day. So that's why HireRising, and so as we turn into consulting and it's less about, only hiring, it just has a positive feel to it of Phoenix Rising and higher and reaching higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never explained that to me, but that's kind of what, if someone were to ask me what does the name mean, I looked at it as like a Phoenix Rising, but a HireRising, almost like a call to do more. You have to rise higher. You have to elevate yourself. You have to like transcend. And essentially, is kind of when I remember seeing the name, because it's spelled hire, like go hire someone. But when I read it as the hire, GHER, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me specifically, I thought like, you are going to a higher calling, right? You are transcending, you are elevating yourself, and then the rising, I thought like a phoenix rising. So
Right.
it's like however you want to look at it. For me, that's kind of what I always thought it meant, because it just like hire, like the actual hire word, like hiring someone didn't seem to connect. It was almost like like a like a play on words, right? I forget the name that they use for that, but it reminds me of like when rappers say something, they say one word, but it has a double entendre, like
Yeah.
it has another meaning, and that's kind of where I thought it went, or where it was coming from, which based on your answer is pretty good, pretty accurate
Yeah.
for me at least, right?
And HR, even the letters are, because this is a function of human resources, bringing somebody on board. Even if you're in consulting, you're, onboarding, offboarding, doing SI work. The circle is because it's centered around relationships.
Okay.
So that's the meaning of why it looks the way it does.
I think relationships are the most important thing. What people will realize if they ever take a leap of faith is that relationships are everything in the business world, because most people don't trust salespeople to begin with.
Yeah.
So there's already that battle that they're trying to fight uphill. But the one thing that always kind of cuts through the noise is relationships, and being able to call someone. And what I've even found too, like a lot of the guests that have been on, now there's like group chats between us. So I'll ask them questions and, maybe plan something, like planned a surprise birthday party / happy hour for a former guest, right? And like 15, 20 people showed up. And then a bunch of other guests showed up too. So that was pretty fun. And, that kind of happens now. It's like, whereas before it would have never been a thing. And now it's like, I can call my friends, right? And I can say, hey, we're going to go do this, or we're going to go do that. Do you want to go? It's like, yeah, I'll go with you, right? So I'll be hanging out with someone at like an event that, isn't related to work at all. It was like a watch event, for example. And it's like, that would have never happened without, having something like this that, allows people to tell their stories. But when it comes back to the research that I did, right? And I think it was fairly easy to find. You talked about, swimming, right? I've never swam like competitively. I don't really do much things competitively, but I notice a lot of times you talk about that background, right? And kind of the lessons learned there and how you attribute them to business, right? But the other thing too that I kind of find interesting with that is I think there's a lot of things that you take from that world of sports, either the competitiveness, the grit, the discipline required, with swimming and things like that, into the business world. And I'll give you a really good example of what I mean. And I talked about this on the last episode. I'll probably talk about it a few more. but I met a CEO in Vegas for a large company, and he talked about the two types of CEOs he's ever met, and there's only two, right? And the first one was people that want to be the CEO, they just dart towards it, right? And then they end up getting to the finish line and realizing that they're missing a lot of different things. And then there's people that didn't intend to be, but they've made their way through business and hopped from different places and gathered all these different skills and built a skill set or a bat belt, if you will. And then when they're there, they're some of the best CEOs that you've seen. And when I think about that explanation, he said he was the second one, right? He fell into the second category because he never wanted to be a CEO. But it reminds me of you, where it's like through your careers, right, and different things you've done, sports, the resale world, right, the ticketing sales and things like that, you've kind of picked up on different things that help you be successful, even though you may not have intended to do it 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, which is, technically put you in category 2, which is the same as he was. So I'm kind of just curious between like the way, like what Graham does from a leisure personal life that kind of fuels the business, right? Because I think there's probably a very blurred line for you, like between personal and work, and one always probably spills into the other. You'll probably find like with commitments, I know when you leave here, you're going to go straight to a personal thing, but I think it'd be interesting for people to hear kind of what a day looks like for you and kind of how that fuels the actual business of HireRising from the top, for example.
I think, I knew I wanted to be successful, but I didn't say, I need to be CEO. And, I've had that title for 7 years, and it's just not, there's no, like, I don't even think of it like that. I think nowadays of like, what skills can I learn? Big skill that I missed out the last couple of years is be honest, transparent, respectful, and then live with the reaction and the consequences of whatever I'm trying to say, sleep well at night knowing I said it in a respectful way, but I was honest with somebody. So there's a lot of skills like that. I didn't, I worked for CyrusOne, and I knew the remote, salesperson was of the future, and so that's why I brought that in, and then others. But wellness, it's huge. I'm 37. I'm 7 years in, doubled the business, many of the years, fastest growing business the last 3 years. I don't feel like I'm burnt out, man. Like, I'm 37. I want to do this for like 25 more years. And it's not about the money. And the reason why is because I have systems, and I think of this like weird but white like picket fence. And I think of this fence being like my systems that protect me. Mm-hmm. And then inside of that, I can play and I can do whatever. And throughout the day, hey, podcast, yes. Maybe ballet to see my daughter after this, yes. Work meeting yesterday with the waste management company, yes. Sales guy calls. I was on the phone with the accountant right before this. Cisco, one of the reps, hey, I've got a bunch of people that are ready to find new jobs. Can I run them by you? Yes. When I leave this, I'll be talking to another entrepreneur that I believe in, and he's in the food and bev industry. He's in his first year. He's struggling. He's starving as a founder, and I love it. He's actually driving a golf cart right now on the weekends to make extra money.
Oh, okay.
I love it.
Was that the guy that I met when I left? Yep. Okay.
And I love it because that's the kind of grit that I want to see. You don't make money your first year or maybe the 5th year, but I want to see the grit of not giving up, and I want to see doing whatever it takes. So that's why I have more belief in him. He'll tell you than himself. How you told me I made you feel was how he told me I made him feel. And I never realized I had that impact on people, So it's honestly, it was one of the best compliments you've ever given. And I really appreciate that, that I inspired you for this and I believed in you, and I saw something. Because he said that too. And I don't BS people. If I just know it when I see it, but then I'm riding with you for a long period of time, like even if you have bumps and stuff, and even if you gave up on the business, I'd still say, when you're ready to get back on the horse, like you still have what it takes. Yeah. And so he has what it takes. So anyway, I'm going to call him on the way. I don't know what he wants to chat about. I'm going to be there for him. But that's kind of the chapter of my life of like, or flipping different things. So back to your wellness is wake up in the morning, bulletproof coffee, which that coffee is like, it keeps you in a fasting state.
Oh, is it with the butter in it?
Yep.
Okay, so you do espresso with the butter, like a
Yep.
stick of butter?
Yeah, I do beans from Central America with no mold toxins, which is what your crash is on coffee.
Okay.
And I do ghee, unsalted, with a little MCT oil for brain function every morning since 2017.
Okay.
And it curbs my hunger, and I fast all the way till about noon, till lunch. Can get a workout on it. I don't feel jittery or shaky when I lift weights. I'm really strong. I'm strong with them. It's fasting cardio too, which burns at a higher rate. So that's how I start off my day. And I'll work through the morning, lunch. I try to like get away for an hour in the middle of the day for a gym, for a workout.
Okay.
Only 3 days a week just to maintain. And the reason I do that is because of efficiency. In the morning, the gym's busy. At night, it's like a show. I like to go middle of the day, nobody's there, and go and do what I need to do. And it lets me work, take an hour away from my phone and really like relax, and then go back. Yeah. When I work out, I do some form of strength because I believe in that. I then walk for 2 miles.
That's at least like a 30-minute walk, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 31.5 minutes because
Okay.
I do a 15:47 mile on a 3.8 every time. So I walk, sometimes an incline. Go downstairs, I get in the sauna, I sweat, and I meditate.
Okay.
I go in the cold plunge for 3 minutes. I go under fully, hold my breath for the last minute, and just take all the inflammation out of my body. And then I go in the hot tub, warm back up to move the blood, and I meditate a second time.
Okay.
Meditations are usually like 10, 11 minutes, and there's some affirmations, but it's going through clearing my head, getting in a happy state, going in through wants, beliefs, and feels. Just so I'm programming my brain to actually believe in the things that I want to believe.
Yeah.
So that's like a really big key. Dinner, children, work, whatever it is, there's factors inside that picket, the fence of day to day. And then in the evening, it's journaling on what was a joyful moment, a big win, what I'm grateful for, thankful for, and anything else that's on my mind. Every day I read Stoicism.
Oh, nice.
Yep. Every day I read kind of a self-esteem reading. And then, let's see, I do read a book. I used to read every month. I don't do that anymore. I read every quarter. So that way I can finish it in 2 months and then put it into practice for a month.
Okay.
And I kind of do my 2 takeaways from that, and I move on to the next book. But by the end of the year, now I only have 8 total takeaways that I can reread within 30 seconds, be reminded of what I learned and which ones maybe I'm not putting into practice. Okay. So those are like my systems, And so I am cold plunging 4 times a week.
Wow. That's a lot of work just to maintain.
That's just the maintenance.
Yeah. Have you?
I don't even think about it anymore because I've been doing it so long.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. So we just bought a new espresso machine. It's like a Breville, I think is how you say it. I've never made my own coffee. Like that coffee machine was the first one I've ever bought personally, right? That was like $50, and I bought it for Lester when he came in for episode 4. So this was like a while ago.
Who I know?
Lester Gotzi.
Okay, no.
So he's over at ASU now.
Okay.
And I think that's how you say his last name. I've never said it or heard it. I've just always read it. And I asked him, hey, what do you want to drink? He said, I'll drink black coffee. So I literally go to the Target down the street here right before he shows up, and I buy this. And I'm literally taking out the cardboard when he shows up. And I go to a place in Gilbert that has like a special, like they roast their own beans. And I bought a bag, and I just let him take it with him. So that's my very first coffee machine ever. I've never used it since he's been here. I made one brew, gave him all the beans, and that's it. And my wife, she always, to get out of bed, she always wants coffee. It's like she doesn't get out of bed until there's coffee kind of thing, right? So I'm either driving to go get coffee or was driving. And I said, it costs $10 for a pound of beans, which is 454 grams-ish. And if you have 15 grams per shot, I can get like 30 some shots, 35 maybe is the number.
But nobody's asked for the coffee since.
No. So that was for here. So when I bought the machine for home, it was for my wife. Because whenever I'd go to a place, it always had to be like custom, like low sugar. Like it was just a lot of work. And then, you know, you go to these different places and they're like, oh, okay, we got this guy again, right? And it's like, you know, my wife has a lot of medical issues. So it's like, for me, I'm just used to it, but everyone else is like, oh, this guy again, right? So I bought this machine and it's probably like, I don't know, it's like $1,000. First machine ever. And every morning I just wake up, you know, measure the beans, throw them in the grinder, hit the grinder, then snap it in, and it brews like some of the best coffees that she's ever had. And it's like, I understand what it's like to never have had coffee, make coffee ever. Going from my dad used to do like instant coffee growing up, like the Folgers, the giant tub of red coffee, to like now I'm actually weighing like 14.9 grams.
Yeah.
So I do that. And I had the coffee this morning. It's actually really good. I do the espresso with almond milk or espresso with cashew milk, and a little bit of brown sugar and some other things in there. But everything comes from Sprouts, and I'm trying to like do better with like weight management is what we'll call it. But I'm always out eating. I'm always doing stuff like with food, so my belt is always crying. So I have to get on the bullet coffee, or at least try it out. I have to get a recommendation for beans, right? But I think it's interesting that you do all that because that's way more than I've ever done. And I almost feel like maybe I need to like step up my game, at least a little bit, right? My wife's always like, okay, here's another story. You know how you know you get too fat? Is for me specifically, I want you to guess how my wife knows that I'm fat. Okay, yeah, you say whatever you want.
I don't know, but my way, like, even off the mics, is got even like you got to be like, this is how I'm gonna get better, and not even be thinking like reverting. Like you got to be like, here's where I want to be. Here's the systems I'm gonna put.
I'll tell you the answer.
All right.
I snore. So she knows.
That's how my ex used to know I was drunk and going to bed drunk.
The snoring is the dead giveaway. So when I start snoring and my wife has to like kick me to wake me up to roll over or whatever, that's how she knows my weight is just above 240. Because like apparently 240 is the number where I start to snore, and I started snoring. So I'm like, all right, I gotta get better about this. So, you know, I guess a little bit of me wants to know what a little bit of you does, so I can take a couple pieces of that. Because she's always like, you know, go to the gym in the morning. I'm like, I'm up so late.
Yeah.
Go to the gym at night. I'm like, oh, I'm busy at night.
No, go middle of the day.
Yeah, so that's what I got to do.
Fast right up into the gym, work out, and go eat after that.
Yeah. So
You'll lose 30 of it, 20.
You think I can lose 30 pounds by the end of January?
Yeah.
All right.
I eat whatever I want on the weekends, and I minimally do my 3 days a week, and I set right around 170, 75.
Okay. So we're back with the 2024 version of Iron Man, also known as Graham.
Listen to that. Yeah. But I always say, like, I live like there's no tomorrow because there isn't. You know, Don Draper says that, right? But there is no tomorrow. So it's like, yes, I have big goals in 30 years, but also when there's turbulence on a plane, I never get nervous because I'm like, I've done everything I've wanted to so far in life, you know, and I live every year like it's the last one. And I believe in it. So the same kind of belief, I guess, at 24, and I said, I'm going to buy that, I don't know how, is the same kind of belief with HireRising right now is, you know, it's going to be big. I don't know where and I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out, you know? That is sick, dude.
Yeah, I have it here because it's kind of cool. It just goes with all the other Star Wars stuff that I have. So like I said, typically these last for a few hours. So this is probably going to be the shortest one ever, which is perfectly fine because
I'll come back.
You can always come back. I was going to say, you can always come back.
Come back with a different outfit.
Yeah, come back with whatever you want, right? But bring the hair because
I'll bring a CIO with me next time.
You know, so interestingly enough, that's possible because of that box right there. So I was just at AWS reInvent, and I did like 3 or 4 recordings while I was there.
Yeah.
But this entire studio is hard to like uplift and move. So I built that box. So that actually has wheels on it on the back that come off, and it's like a giant suitcase.
Cool.
And I have a case for all these cameras. So I can literally just unplug everything. And the same, not obviously not the wall and stuff, but the same setup of all the gear. The tripods are right here. So I can take these with me So this is something that I'm looking at doing is if you're looking at doing any sort of like marketing related stuff on site with a client interview, I can now do that with this. So
Can you imagine doing that with a hiring spree with a company that says, "Hey, we're going into hiring," and I get on site and I go, "Why would anybody want to come to X company?" You know,
Yeah.
and they go, "Oh, because we're doing work in this and that," and I go, and look at, we have 15 different roles. You've hired really quickly, managers or whatever. Here's a great culture. I even seen your 401 benefits. Why don't you tell everybody? Imagine laying that up for a client. And how that would be awesome.
yeah, so that's something that either I can do here or I have enough of the gear where I could take it with me. So not necessarily part of the podcast for you, but just like off the record, like
Cool.
if that's something that you see as useful, because like each of these cameras, like probably like $3,000 a piece. So to have someone have all this with all the gear, which is probably another 2 or 3 in there,
Yeah.
where they can just like show up and travel and do it, you're gonna pay a hefty price for that. But I can now do it, right? So
Very cool.
client testimonials, interviews. I'm trying to get the arena at ASU or GCU reserved and do like a 4-person like panel, center court with the camera shots like hitting the empty seats in the background, but in the middle. So if there's a way to do like the Phoenix Suns, like if you know Steve Reese well enough to say, hey, like how do we get like on a Thursday night, me, like you with like 3 or 4 other people, and you can do like a HireRising panel or something like that. Like I have all the stuff except for the lighting.
We should do a hiring panel.
Yeah.
To kick off next year, and I'll choose my 4 favorite.
And then just go.
I work at ASU too now, right? Like the WP Carey MBA student school. I'm like a mentor over there with all the students.
Okay.
Whatever. I'm sure we can do something at ASU if we need to.
So I've got everything ready to go. It's more so for personal use for like this.
Yeah.
But I also have it now designed where I can unplug everything off the back and then throw the covers on and roll it to the car, load it up, and then show up. And as long as I have power and actually just power, I can run the entire show.
Nice.
So it's kind of like another way for me to not necessarily make money, but I mean, people would pay a pretty penny to have something like this. So maybe that's just like an extra, like something, I guess.
We'll call it the HireRising Roadshow.
Whatever you want. I'm starting a new podcast with another guy from a security company out of California called the Tech Degenerates, where it's more mobile. And whereas this is more so like personal stories, that's more so like he's a CISO, I'm like a sales guy, and we're kind of pinning the people in the middle where it's like my side versus not side versus side, but more so he can smell the bullshit and I can kind of give them like candid feedback because I'm not their friend.
Yeah.
And it's like it allows him to invite people on that I can like call bullshit or he can sniff it out from a technical perspective. So it's kind of like a new thing that we're starting. So that's actually the inspiration for that box. But yeah, man, I don't want to hold you, especially with ballet, but like you said, you can always come back. I don't really do an outro for these. So maybe I just say, I want to thank you for coming in. I thought it was great. My favorite part was, having you show up and at least, the one thing that we've talked about in the past is thanking people for the things that they've done for you or the impact that they've had. So I wanted to make sure I at least shared that in the very beginning with you. That was probably my favorite part because I don't think enough people thank one another nowadays for the things that they've done for them without realizing it. So there's that. And whenever you're ready to come back, we can do it. This is built here. It's stuck here. The lease on this building doesn't end for like another 3 or 4 years. So it'll be here for a while. Cool. If you ever want to leave and do this stuff on the road, you got my number.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure, man.